I went to the University of Texas at Austin and had a great time there. Dr. Cherry Watson was head of the creative writing department at the time, and I wrote a short story that Dr. Watson took and held up to the class. He said, "This is the best short story I've read in 20 years of teaching." And it was mine, and I was just blown away. I didn't even think I was a writer at that time. And that was the kind of the spark for me that kind of said, I can really do this. And that led me into advertising, then advertising led me into writing novels. It's all fiction, so why not do a novel? It took a lot of ink, to tell you the truth. You call a lot of agents. I probably called and wrote query letters to over 400 agents, 20 or 30 publishers, and I had a previous experience with a publisher that I had sold the book. They gave me an editor, then they wanted me to change the book. And it was like, well, that's not the book I wrote. And so we went back and forth, and so I sent them their money back. And I said, you know, I was really kind of hacked off at that point, like, what do I do? And a friend of mine told me about Lulu Press and self-publishing. And at first I thought, well, I don't know. So I checked into self-publishing, and it had as many snakes in the grass as regular publishing did, it seemed like. But Lulu was very easy to use. It's print on demand. You send them your manuscript, they prepare the book, they get it ready to go to market just like a normal publisher would, except you as the artist have complete control over the product. And call me a control freak, I kind of like that. Well, you know, when you're an artist and you paint a picture or you do a sculpture, there's a certain longevity to that. Someone's not going to come by and say, well, I think the Mona Lisa needs a mustache, you know. A writer sometimes is put into a situation where editors want to change things, they want to lengthen things, shorten things, change context. And as an artist, I don't want people fooling with that. I've taken a long time to craft something, and I want the audience to get a sense of what my message is and how I wrote it. And that's the control I'm talking about. It's so they can enjoy the art that I created for them. Yeah, I've had several people take a look at the properties and really like them, and especially the Man on the Grassy Knoll got a lot of interest. I really had such success with the previous 6 books at Lulu that I really wanted to do this book myself and publish it just the way I wanted to. Got Bob Young to do the cover. He did a great job on the cover, and really I'm kind of excited about the turnabout of this book. We've sold over 400 copies. We haven't even advertised it yet, so that's kind of cool. Actually, how I discovered it at the time, this other book that I had sold and that the publisher wanted to change came about. 3 of my friends were all self-producing albums. They had gone out and they're music guys, and they're doing blues and country and kind of some classical stuff, and it was really cool stuff. And I said, well, if they can do that, why can't I just self-publish my own novel? And another friend of mine was doing a textbook for his class at the university, and he didn't want to buy a huge anthology. He wanted very specific things. So he self-published an anthology for his students. And I thought, well, you take those 5 people and their experiences, and I said, why not go to self-publishing and try it? And that's kind of how I got into the whole self-publishing field. No, the first off the Lulu Press was actually Among the Aspen, which is an interesting story. I wrote it while I worked at Footcone Building out in California. And in those days, I was on the car business. I was a creative director on Mazda. And the car business has kind of like 6 months on and then 6 months off. And you're waiting for the factory to turn out the next year's model. And so while they're doing that, you kind of sit there with your thumbs going like this. So I said, the next time in the next down session, I'm going to write a novel. And I did, and it was really cool. It's about 2 people that kind of drop out of society and go live on the side of a mountain for a while and all the things that happen to them. But when I put it onto a disc, I put it into a box, and right after that I moved to Dallas, and guess what? It went away. I had no idea where it was. And I was just freaked out because here, you know, something I worked on for 6 months of my life was gone. And one day I got this box out, and there were all these discs in it, and I found the novel. I probably duplicated it 800 times to make sure I had it. But it was the first one I went to press with Lulu, and then Baby Change Everything followed that. And then there were the three Scott Keen trilogies, the three books of the Scott Keen trilogy. And then after that, the Uncivil War, and then that led up to the Man on the Grassy Knoll. The trilogy was separated by about 4 years. The first two books were back to back. The House Next Door and Under the Radar they were logical follow-throughs. And I didn't really know how long the Scott Keen series was going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be 7 books, 8 books, was it going to be another Harry Potter series? And I didn't want to do that. So I came to the idea, well, I'll make it a trilogy. I can deal with 3. That's a number I can deal with. But I'd already started doing the research on Baby Change Everything and on the Uncivil War. So the last book, Between Sunday's Columns, kind of had to go on the back burner for a while. So it was about a 3.5-year period between the number 2 and the number 3 books in the trilogy. I went to Washington, D.C. with a good friend of mine, Steve Confer, who is the director, and we were over there doing a project, and Steve's brother from Philadelphia is a avid Civil War buff and knows the administrator of Gettysburg. And he got us a one-on-one tour with this guy to go all over Gettysburg one afternoon. We had a free day, and it was a marvelous afternoon there, getting to see stuff that I guess most people don't see. And on the way back into Washington, Steve just kind of asked me the question. He said, have you ever thought about what America would be like had the South won the Civil War, or at least had tied? What would have happened? And we, consumed several beers over several nights thinking about this. And he said at one time, he said, you ought to write a book about this. And I joked with him and said, well, if you'll do the movie, I'll write the book. But out of that came this idea of, there is a book in this. And so the Uncivil War is the story of America divided on the Mason-Dixon line from Delaware to California. And it's set in current times, and it's really about these people that try to reunify America after 100 and some odd years of being divided. But I had to go back and recreate all kinds of historical moments. I had to make Lincoln a fall guy. I had to make Lee became the president of the United States. He went back from the South, back over to the North. Kennedy was not assassinated in this book in Dallas. Instead, it was Johnson, and Nixon was the one that had him assassinated because he was scared of Texas rising up and becoming a third country. So I had to change history a lot in that, and that took a little courage because when you sit there going like, I'm going to make Abraham Lincoln a bad guy, you got to be careful when you go in to do that. But it reminds the reader as they sit there and go through the book, oh yeah, this happened in the 1860s and it led to this. So it was a reinforcement all along the way of why we're divided in 2010 and what these people are trying to overcome. Well, it makes it really tough if we're two countries. I'll tell you what, traveling just between the states is a problem. Doing interstate commerce, traveling to the north is a problem. Telecommunications, who sided with who during the wars, how do you get resources back and forth? It would be a real mess. It would kind of like we would be another Mexico to the United States. It was, and in the book I made it appear that way, that it's really hard for the people who are living on the continent to kind of understand all these differences and still deal with them 100 years later. Well, obviously I did change history in the Uncivil War to make a historical novel work the way it did. But really the facts and figures of the Man on the Grassy Knoll are pretty straightforward. I just put a historical, fictional character amongst them to tell the story. Really the time of the assassination, the things going on around the assassination, it's all very real. In fact, if you were to pick it up and read it, you would think, God, this guy was right there when all of this was going on, and he's just telling his story. So I didn't really have to make up a lot of history for that. What I did was focus the amount of history that he's going to tell you so you don't get weighed down with a lot of dates and times and stuff like that. I think it did its job impeccably, because I think what their job was to do was to reassure the American public that there was no conspiracy. I don't agree with them. I don't think that they were right. I don't think Oswald acted alone. I don't think he was that smart or that good to have done all this, hence the book. But I think the Warren Commission did the job. America coming out of the 50s was used to kind of being led around by its nose by institutions, and they really needed to feel at that time that the institutions were protecting them. And I think that's what the Warren Commission did. And interestingly enough, I think maybe the Warren Commission was probably part of the reason for the 1960 civil unrest, because the young people said, wait a minute, this is BS. We're not buying into this. There's too many unanswered questions. I mean, you pick up a bullet that's pristine out of a Lincoln Continental, and it was the bullet that went through Kennedy, through Connolly, and back into the floorboard, and it doesn't have scratches on it. I don't think so. No, I don't think Oswald acted alone. I don't think he was that good. I don't think he was as he wasn't smart enough to pull all that off by himself. I think there were other people helping him. I don't know if it's Raul Salazar, but I think he did not act alone. And I think Ruby's actions 2 days later kind of proved that out for us. One of the things I did with The Man on the Grassy Knoll, which was very interesting from a writer's perspective, is I wrote the whole novel from a transcript format. So everything that's in the book is really coming out of the mouth of Raul Salazar, the second shooter at the Kennedy assassination. And why that was important to me is, and I tried to write the book about 4 or 5 times over a decade, and every time it just kept getting more and more and more weighted down with history and facts, and it was just boring. And by him telling the story, I only have to get about the number of facts that he would normally give in an interview, and he could slant them any way he wanted to. So it made it a lot easier to make the story move along and to give the reader a feel like I'm really there because this guy did all this. And it really is about the kind of nefarious underbelly of American foreign policy and how it turns on us from time to time. I think there is. Again, I don't know if it's Raul. He makes a good case for himself in the book. But yes, I think there were others working with Oswald or around Oswald for the assassination of Kennedy. Well, if you look at the Zapruder film alone, Jack Kennedy's head goes in the wrong direction for the first bullet to have hit him from behind. It hit him from the other direction. And it's something that the Warren Commission never questioned. So the piece of film itself raises questions in my mind.